Good afternoon, everyone. We're here at Studio 23 for the virtual tour of Rosemary Kavanagh's My Bay City Family Tree. And we are lucky enough to have Rosemary here today for the tour and her cousin, Pat Schwedler. Liz Schwedler. There we go, Liz. All right, so we're going to start at the beginning, and we invite you all to enjoy this virtual tour with us. It's a beautiful day. Rosemary, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Rosemary, now I know you started this painting in a particular place of history. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, I started it during the COVID.
Right, very appropriate.
And actually in the beginning it was really difficult for me to get the mask on right. So that's why I did this. It's kind of comical. You know, it's kind of loose, and at first, you know how they didn't tell us how to wear them? So in other words, when I was wearing this, apparently it didn't work very well. But it's just a really incredible, tragic, and powerful time right now. So I wanted to do a self-portrait with the mask.
Oh, thank you, Rosemary. And when you come in, we are open, and we can allow folks on a limited basis in, but you'll be able to see Rosemary's bio and the description of her family tree, which I will post on our website.
And it's oil paint on wood.
Oil paint on wood.
Oh, that's the other thing. I couldn't buy canvas at the art stores because they were all closed in the beginning.
Oh,
So I panicked, and I went to Home Depot and bought wood.
great solution. All righty, Liz, why don't you take us right around, Liz, to the next grouping. Let's go.
This way. You can start?
Sure, you go ahead. We will be talking about our Carroll and Kavanagh ancestors. Many of them are our grandparents' siblings. This one is my grandmother's sister, and her name is Rhea, or Aurelia Ryan. And she married a World War I soldier. Roby did a beautiful painting of him, but that painting is...
At All Artworks Gallery, they represent me. I met them through Art Prize. So they're selling that on their website, and it's a real tiny painting. But yeah, she was a beauty, wasn't she?
Yes.
Did you know her?
I did not.
Okay.
The ones
I mean,
that
when
I
you were a
did
little
know,
girl.
I will
Okay.
mention.
Okay.
Now moving on to this dress, and I see your friend is, Rosemary, is out in the audience that helped you with the designs. If you would like to speak to that, yes.
Oh, well, she's in Iran. Wonderful.
Yes, so if you'd like to stand by the dress.
I'm so happy that you're with us today. You're so far away. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Okay, she's watching. She put a heart up, so I think we're good.
Okay.
And her name again is?
Azadeh Bidar.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but we went to Pratt together a long time ago in the late 70s, and we have been friends on Facebook, I think maybe 6-7 years, maybe longer, because Pratt contacted me and said, do you know any of these people? And I saw that she was in the architecture part of the school, which was very conservative. I was in the wild part. Anyway, so we got together and we thought we'd work on a project together, but because she's so far away, and we were limited for time, we discussed how we were going to do it. So she sent me the images to work from the Persian Art Museum, I think, and archaeological digs, and certain patterns like the flower pattern. You see that on tiles and buildings. And I just thought it was beautiful, and apparently this is her favorite one too. So I painted that around the front, and then around the back, we have some images that are in a different color scheme, but I brought the pattern of the flowers all the way around the bottom. And
Oh, she says, love your work.
uh,
And another gentleman loved the collaboration with an artist from the Middle East.
yes, and
Very
I love
interesting.
what you sent me It was beautiful, it was wonderful to work from, and I hope that politicians all over the world will learn from artists. How similar and simple we all are, and creative is the way to go. So you will see me running for president.
There we go. Yay, artists. All right. Liz, now let's hear from you on these two.
Well, this one is from more, Roby will have to talk about this one because that's from her mother's side of the family.
Yes, that's my grandmother, Maureen Daly, and she lived on McKinley. She grew up on McKinley Street in a big, big house. She was an only girl, and I think I made her kind of sad in this painting compared to the other paintings that I did here. That I've done numerous ones. And she was a really good grandmother. She was a wonderful person. But you know, back then, a lot of the marriages were arranged.
Oh.
But she did fall in love with my grandfather once they were married. But you know, they're scared at first.
You know, your Anne is watching from New York. Andita is out there watching.
Anne from New York?
Yes. Watching from New York.
Oh, just like, I don't know what's happening.
When I was around 9 years old, we moved into the Carroll, my family moved into the Carroll home. And it was full in the back attic of all these pictures. And so it was just a few years ago that I began to archive these pictures and find out, identify who they were. And that was when I then turned them over to Rosemary to paint those. And this is one of the Carroll sisters. Her name was Maud. And Maud was a singer. She sang with the Grand Ole Opry and had many friends that would come around from the Grand Ole Opry. She died relatively young when she was in her 40s. Her death certificate said the grip, which means today that's what we call the flu or some influenza type things. So she never married, she died relatively young, but left her mark in the music world.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I just thought the photograph was so beautiful, you know. I wanted to keep it sepia toned when I painted it, but I thought I'd add the pink little roses because apparently she was so delicate, and that's why she passed away young. It's just sad.
And Liz, Cindy is watching from Oscoda.
Hi,
Now, Rosemary, how about, we've had questions on this particular painting.
Mary Kavanagh Navarre was our great aunt, and I painted her on very heavy wood. This was during the time when the art stores were closed. And of course it was a black and white photograph, but I added the green to match her eyes, the blue-green ribbon, just to bring that out in her eyes. And another cousin of mine told me that she still haunts the house that she lived in, which is hard to believe because she looks like she was happy. Maybe she has some unfinished business.
Well, and I can add to that, that Mary has two daughters that are still alive here in Bay City, Mark Miller and Maureen Hoyer. And Mark and her other sister Rosemary were very helpful in identifying the people that I have and helping give me stories and tell me about them. We also have many cousins that I know from her. So she still has that Bay City connection.
Oh, absolutely. And I've actually heard through the streets that the ghost is there in a house.
Yeah, the people that live there call her cousin up and say, we saw Mary again. And I want to know, what age is she? What's she wearing? Do you think she'd pose for me? But, just adds to the intrigue.
adds to
you
the
know?
intrigue in the story. So we're here today with Rosemary Kavanagh and her cousin Liz Schwedler, and this is My Bay City Family Tree solo exhibit for Rosemary. Thanks everyone for joining. We are going to go to another wall here. All right, this is a lot to handle, isn't it? This is a lot of family members.
Yeah.
So let's start at the far right.
Fidelis,
Oh yeah, Fidelis. I didn't know how to pronounce it.
that is Aunt Fidelis, our great aunt. She was married to a gentleman, Harry Martin.
Yeah, he's there on the very end. The drips, right here.
No, actually, that's Brother Michael.
Well, a lot of family members.
Well, I wasn't alive then, so I tried my best. Uh-oh. We'll have to
Okay.
change that one.
So Rosemary, would you like to stand in front of the large portrait here?
Okay. This is my grandfather, Dudley Kavanagh, and he lived on 6th Street, but he grew up on 6th Street, right across the street from his house. He has a big blue house when he came here. And he was a judge here in Bay City. And this is a painting from a photograph that Liz gave me when he was very young. And where did he live out west?
In Oregon.
He lived in Oregon for a while and then came back, but he was really handsome, so I nicknamed him Studley.
There we go.
Dudley,
But
Dudley.
I have wonderful letters from him between my father and my grandfather. My father was over in Europe, and apparently he knew a lot of secrets about my dad, and my dad shouldn't have told him anything, but so did my mom too, you know. But they would speak in code, and I had to read the letters like 10 times before I figured out what they were talking about, so it was really exciting. And he was a very strict guy. He seemed from his letters that he was really nice, but the typical father, always lecturing my dad. While my dad's over in Europe dropping bombs, he's telling him now, when you come home, you have to be more responsible. But I painted this real wild and loose and fast. I think I did it in one day.
Oh boy.
Well, I paint at night, so it was one night. But and I was gonna go back and do the second layer because I paint in 3 layers. But I just thought it would be neat to let it alone because youth is fleeting, and it was just like, you know, a memory that we have just flashes, and so I wanted to paint it fast. Were you gonna say something?
Well, I
Liz?
would like to add that I have a vitae that he wrote about himself. And the very last thing he says is, my grandchildren are my joy. And I have a beautiful picture of him holding one of my oldest cousins. She's tweaking his nose. And we never got to meet him, but he would have been a good grandpa.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
fabulous.
He died young, well, he was 70.
Uh-huh.
And I have his death certificate. I ordered all of those from all the grandparents and a few great-grandparents, and my parents, because I wanted to see what they really died from, because you know, a lot of information is just passed on. And, those are things that
Yes.
are also passed on genetically, you know. Like good looks. I thought that would make you laugh.
This is Aunt Kitty. She, our great aunt, Carol. She was a very trickster, humorous, lovely lady
And brave.
and brave. She met her to-be husband not until her 50s, and her father was not at all happy with her. But she was friends with the Shearers, the Shearer building here in Bay City, and they helped her and her soon-to-be husband get together in spite of her father's disapproval.
Are you going to leave the other part out? All right, so we have a change in who these people are. This is Daniel Carroll on the right, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
And he was, he died young, He was an alcoholic, but his funeral, I have it, his funeral, a lot of the letters that I have from the aunts that they wrote my father, the great aunts, they wrote my father when he was in Europe, are so devastating and sad. He worked for an insurance company when he passed away.
Oh.
And one of the aunts said that the house where you lived, Liz, was filled with so many flowers from the funeral that they had to bring a lot of them across the street.
His home was across.
Oh,
across
okay,
the street.
okay. But I think the funeral was actually in the big house.
Most of them.
Yeah,
were.
because
Most
it
of
was a
them were.
huge house, and
Yes.
they needed the room, I guess. But
Oh, no.
I think he looks like my ex-brother-in-law, Jerry Carroll in Ireland. And they're Carrolls. He's the image of him, and that's spooky, I think.
So this is his brother Michael, and Michael, they say, was the sensible one. And when I look at all the different death certificates, Michael's the one that signed them. So he was
Aww.
and he worked for his father and the produce company as long as they had it. So there were 3 brothers, and the third one is over on the other side. But these were the 2. The wild one and the sensible one.
Yeah, well, he actually looks like, his real Giles Kavanaugh's around the corner. That's even more interesting.
All right.
Oh, you're talking about the Carrolls.
Here? This painting right here came from a postcard. When my grandfather was in Oregon, his family would send postcards. He kept hundreds of postcards, which I have, and several of them have pictures on them. In this picture, we have his 4 sisters, his brother Jack, Jack's first wife, and the first niece that was born to Giles. Her name was Pauline. So I always think of this photo as they were showing off the new car.
Yeah, and I actually went around Bay City looking for that house and that building next to it, and it's actually on Johnson Street. So they must have been coming around the corner from 6th Street. The house is still there. It looks exactly the same. Okay, this is a painting that I did of my father on the right, his brother Joe in the back in the green. This is Jerry Carroll, my father's first cousin, and this is Jerry's baby brother. Do you remember
Bud.
his name?
They always called him Bud.
Bud. How could I forget that name? But of course it was in black and white, and I painted this on raw linen, so that's pretty difficult to work with, but I chose that because I thought it would be fun to do different textures. And I actually found a pram just like this, and I have it at home, and I was going to put it in front of the painting, but I just thought maybe somebody would get in it or something. like Liz. Just kidding. But my father actually, as a child, looked like he did in his 30s and 40s. Very studious, handsome, high foreheads. They all had high foreheads even as little kids. But I thought it was really cute because when I lived in Ireland for 8 years, and when I lived in Connecticut, I would come to Bay City once a year, and I'd go to visit Jerry Carroll, my father's first cousin, and he was wonderful. When he lived in the house on 6th Street, and then when he moved, he would bring me to the graveyards and show me all the different graves, which Liz did as well, because I couldn't find the Carrolls. They were in another graveyard. But, so I like to see this picture of him as a child, but he, as well, looks quite mature for a little boy. But they're all laughing, life is innocent, and all that stuff.
And this is a photo of all the Carroll sisters. And I won't go through all of them again because we've seen them as individuals. But I just love this photo and thus this oil painting with all the beautiful lace and the dresses.
Yes.
And they knew how to dress to the nines, the Carroll family did.
And their dad knew how to pay for it. Oh, that's and he had the Carol Fruit and Veg on 3rd Street, where, okay. This is Giles Kavanagh, our great uncle. He was the father of the Supreme Court Judge Thomas Giles Kavanagh. And he was 19 in that photograph when he posed, and I thought it was just a funny, charming image of a teenager. He was 19, I guess. And you know how you are at that age. You just think it's going to last, your youth is going to last forever. But that's why I thought that was really charming, the wicker chair and everything. And this is my grandmother, Bridget Carol Kavanagh. She married the big painting there that
Dudley.
I showed you, Dudley. She married the painting. But I just wish I would have known her. She had Bright's disease, and she still raised 6 children. She was the only sister out of all the Carroll sisters to have a degree. And she was a teacher.
She was a
wasn't she?
teacher.
There you go. It's passed on. And I just like the little flower bud in her hair, and again the lace. I wanted to keep it simple because I think she's kind of plain looking, but an extraordinary person, so I wanted to concentrate more on her face and then the energy around her. That's why I painted brush strokes like that. Most of the backgrounds, it's the energy. Okay?
And here we have another collaboration in marriage. That was a Carol and a Kavanagh, and this is another Carol and Kavanagh, one of the Carol brothers, Jay, my great uncle Jay, and he married a Kavanagh sister, and our great aunt Catherine, and she lived until she was 99. And so I was able to get to know her. She used to come over to the house all the time. Both of these photos were given to us by their granddaughter, Kathy Hammy, who also had many treasures of photos that she was able to share with us. So,
And he raised prize chickens.
he raised prize chickens.
So that's why I put this painting here. Actually, that's my sister Bridget's chicken. She raised chickens on her farm. And I asked her to hold that up for me, and I took a photograph, and then I did the painting. So that's why I put it there.
This right here is our great-grandfather, and he's the one who started the produce company in Bay City that became he became quite a thriving businessman, and eventually the portion that was produce went to the Bosco Fruit and Vegetable Company, and the bottling portion of it went to the Carrolls.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Now there was an article in the paper about this photo. The businessmen in town during the winter would find not so much to do. For example, what produce would they have then? So in the afternoons they would gather on by the Empire Motel on 5th Street, and they would race all the way down to Park Avenue, with the winner, of course, getting cigars and a couple of drinks. And that would happen until January, when they would move to the river and hold the races on the river. And this continued until they were overrun with automobiles and could no longer handle the competition on the road.
And cigarettes instead of cigars.
So Roby, this is one of my favorites of your pictures.
I know.
Your paintings.
I love this one. This is my grandmother, Daly, who grew up on McKinley. And this is after she married, and it's in the 1920s. And this is my Aunt Rosemary. And I thought it was such a charming photograph, so I had to do a painting of it. And I kept it very subtle again with a lot of browns and blacks. And then this is a rainbow coming in. You know, like I look at it as the light of God. they were both very religious. And the Daly name was on my mom's side of the family, even though she grew up in Missouri, my mother, and my grandmother moved to Missouri. I think it's really important to include her, and I think I have like 5 paintings of her. But when I was 4 years old, my sisters and I were sent to live with my grandparents one year. I think it was for about 6 months, because my mom was dying. And then my mom changed her mind and didn't die. But while we were all gone, they added another floor onto our house. Anyway, when I went to visit her, when I was 4 years old and I turned 5, I remember every day because it was so fascinating. They lived in a big white house. They had a lot of servants. She brought me to the swimming pool every day because I wouldn't take my nap. She bought us beautiful, beautiful clothes and patent leather shoes, and she had Coke parties for us, which actually scared Annie and myself. Anyway, she was a very loving, kind, generous woman, and she always sent my mom money all the time, and paid for cleaning ladies for us. We had 2 servants growing up, but it didn't really work because there were 11 kids. I mean, it never ended, you know. They'd come back and they were like, oh my God. But yeah, she kind of had a hard life, but she was full of so much love for her children and grandchildren that remained with me, and I'll never forget it. And I hope to see her someday. Why are you laughing? Because she'll have to take a trip down
This
south.
photo is an absolute treasure to me. It is a photo of my mother with her father, who at that time was Judge Kavanagh, and her 2 brothers, Rosemary's dad, Tom, and my Uncle Joe Kavanagh. And this was taken in front of their house on 6th Street, which she did do a painting over there at that one. So, of course, it's during the war, and a moment captured in time that I absolutely treasure. I love it so much that I had
commissioned me.
Rosemary make a smaller version of it so that I could have it in my house.
Which took me longer than the larger version. I had a problem with Uncle Joe's face. I had to change it. There's one thing that I just want to mention that's interesting about that painting. My father on the left was a double agent during the war. He was a spy for 2 countries. And I only found that out from reading his letters. And he told me when I interviewed him, but I didn't get what he was saying. He said, I didn't work for one group. Do you understand? I worked for myself. I was like, what's he talking about? So anyway, whoever took this picture, my dad didn't like it. Because they told him, don't get anyone to take pictures of you. And so that's why he looks like that. And I think it's really, and it was probably my mom that took the picture. No, they were just married or something. But anyway, I just think that's interesting.
it is.
World War II. And this is one of the dresses that I made from, I cut up an abstract painting. And the painting originally was as big as my dining room. I laid it on the floor and I just painted it in acrylic and oil, layer after layer. And it's so thick right now that it would be very painful to wear. And the pattern is from the 1940s. It's actually a really old vintage pattern that I looked for on eBay for my oil and cans, historical dresses. And I actually had a model wearing that in a fashion show, and she was that tiny. This is my great-grandmother, Mary Lewis Daly, and my grandmother. And I love this painting because she was I never knew what she looked like. You know, so when I saw photographs of her, I was really amazed. But she was very strict because she came from a hard life herself. And she wanted to marry wealth, and she was very adamant about getting what she wanted. And she was very strict with my grandmother, and my grandma always had to do what she said. I could just tell in this picture. the journey had begun.
These are,
Oh
again,
yeah, this is the same
Rosemary's
grandmother, Maureen Daly, and she grew up very wealthy. She had 2 brothers, only girl, and her mother would buy very beautiful clothes for her and dress her up and make her get her photographs taken. And I just love this painting though. This is on loan from my sister Bridget. She owns it. And Bridget's daughter Shannon it has that same, she does this with her hand, you know, she poses with her hand like that in photographs and doesn't even know she's doing it. And there's no fur there or anything.
these are the houses that they grew up. This is the house I grew up in, right here on Lincoln Street, and it was the Carroll home. We actually bought it from Aunt Viette, whose picture is in the window. We didn't take a look at her.
Beatrice, yeah.
Beatrice, we called her Aunt Viette. So my great aunts lived there, and then this is this house on 6th Street where our parents grew up. And it then went to my Uncle Joe
Oh, yeah, right.
Kavanagh for a while, and then it went to Jerry Carroll for a while. So we had 3 different generations of family that lived there. And then this house,
That's the Fidelius Martin house, her Harry Martin house. Harry built that for our great aunt Fidelius, Carol, and they didn't live in it long, even though she lived in it the rest of her life, I think. But he passed away very young during the stock market.
yes, it was he committed suicide. He was involved in some banking issues, and so Aunt Fidelis lived there the rest of her life. She'd taken a lodger here and there to help her.
Yeah, and I've actually been in that house because it was on the market a couple years ago, and it's beautiful. And all these houses, even this one, is a mansion on the inside. It goes way back, and from the outside you wouldn't think it. You know?
It was 3. I
Oh
looked.
my
I went and
God.
checked, and they bought 3 city lots to build that house. So it's built on 3 city lots.
Yeah, and it is. You walk in the front door and you just can't believe how massive it is. It's just incredible. Okay, we're running out of time. This is my daughter Elizabeth in Connecticut when she was a little girl. That was for a juried show in Farmington, Connecticut. And this is my, and I have her sitting in the sunlight because she's the sweetest little girl. And even as an adult, she's so kind and loving and generous, just amazing. This is my brother Terry. He's a toxicologist. He lives out in Washington State. And anytime I talk to him, I don't know what he is saying because he's so intelligent. So I just nod my head, But he's always talking like that and holding his keys like he has to go somewhere. Like, oh, you're with Roby, run. This is my sister Annie. I painted this 20 years ago, right after 9/11. I lived in Connecticut at the time, and it was very traumatizing and emotional for me, as it was for everyone. But because I was so close to New York City, and also I had a cousin who was in that building, but he's always late, and he was late that morning, and that was a blessing because I guess he saw the building come down, but he was in his car trying to get into the building, and then anyway, I was very upset about it. I wanted to do a simple painting of the people that jumped out of the windows. That horrified me. It just is so horrible, but it's a choice they made, and being an artist, oh, that stuff intrigues me. And this is Dita, my sister. She posed for me here at Studio 23. I think it was like 3 years ago. And I did that pretty quick in a couple of hours, and I left it that way instead of finishing it, because again, it was a moment in time. And she's a blessing. She lives right around the corner from me, and it's a lot of fun. And this is my daughter Annie and her husband Frank. and she fell asleep one Christmas in his lap. She was so exhausted. And I thought it was the neatest image, so I took a photograph of them and they didn't know it. And it's when they lived in Connecticut close to me before they moved down south. So I used to help with the kids a lot, a couple times a week. This is my daughter Audrey. She married Garrett Ruland, who is from Bay City. And he grew up right at the end of 5th Street in a cul-de-sac in a carriage house. And it's just total coincidence. Audrey grew up in Connecticut. They met at Michigan State University. She wanted to go to school there because she wanted to be a veterinarian, and it was the best school at the time. So we sent her there, and she cried a lot the first semester and said, "I want to come home. I want to come home." We were like, "Oh, God." So then she met Garrett, and we never saw her again. I'm kidding, but yeah, she posed for me. I did that from life, I think in an hour and a half. And this was during my daughter Ann's wedding in 2004 in Newport, Rhode Island. And my sister, my nephew, and my brother came over to visit in the house we were renting for the wedding. And I asked them to pose for me, and I took a lot of photographs of the Last Supper. And initially this was called Doubting Thomas because of the Thomas English muffins, but I changed it and just called it The Last Supper because this happened I painted this 16 years ago, and a lot of things happened in my family, so it's kind of sad. And this is my brother Tommy. He was sleeping after he went hunting on my sister Bridget's farm, and I took a photograph of him, and I called him up later and I said, "I did a painting of you sleeping at Bridget's," and he said, "I wasn't sleeping," which is funny because I had the proof. But I just think it's so lovely. So they bought that from me and they loaned it to me for the show.
Oh.
You did. Oh, there's one.
So we're going to wrap this up here, and I want to thank Rosemary and Liz for leading us on this wonderful tour, the history of Bay City. Very fascinating. Rosemary and Liz, when you get back to the Facebook Live video, you'll be able to see comments from all your friends and some questions, friends and family. It's just a great documentation for everyone. This video will stay up on our Facebook Live in our library. It'll also stay on our website when we get it posted there. So you'll be able to share it, and it will be there for a long, long time. So I welcome everybody down to the studio. Rosemary and Liz will be here this afternoon if you have more questions. And also, there is more work in the windows, so that should entice you down. You can see that work basically 24/7. It's a great window shopping type setting, and we look forward to you all coming down and seeing. So thank you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.